It differently. Shabbat Shalom. My name is Amy Rips. I know some of you. I don't know all of you. Glad to be here. I balance my time between Beth Meyer and now Bethel. So Korach is an interesting parsha. There's an obvious tie to the political situation today. I'm no expert in Bible. I'm also no expert in politics. I'm not talking about that. Just as a brief overview, Korach and a few others challenge Moshe and Aaron's authority over them. The rebels and their families are punished by God in supernatural ways. Some were consumed by fire and others were swallowed up by the earth. Before I go into the lesson I want to take from this, when I start to study a Torah portion to give a Dvar Torah, I like to read through it in English and see what jumps out at me as being, questionable, anomalies, whatever. So the first thing that I noticed was in the very first line. We're introduced, Vayikach Korach, and Korach, son of Izhar, and the son of Kohat, and the son of Levi, so he's of the tribe of Levi. And then they mentioned three others, Datan and Abiram, who are brothers, the son of Eliav, and a guy named On, who's the son of Pelet, and these three are descendants of Ruvain. And there's a lot written about, Korach being a Levite, he's cousins to Aaron and Moshe. He's challenging their authority over him. And these others are from the tribe of Ruvain, the firstborn, also challenging the authority of the Levites. Now, we know what happens to Korach and to Datan and Abiram. They either get consumed by fire, they get swallowed up by the earth. It's all very dramatic and very exciting. And we never hear about On. We never hear about him again. He's not mentioned. We're introduced to him. He's there with the rebels. No clue. Now, this is not the only time in my life that I've had characters disappear. Some of you may remember in the TV show Happy Days, Richie Cunningham had an older brother. His name was Chuck. He was in a few episodes, and then you never hear from him again. He doesn't show up at Joni's wedding. He's not at Richie's wedding. Like, what happened to him? And then a little bit more ridiculous, and I admit probably fewer of you are familiar with this, in the soap opera All My Children, there was a guy in 1970 named Bobby Martin. He goes up to the attic to get skis, and he's never heard from again. And this makes for great fodder whenever they're doing specials on soap opera lore, like what happened to Bobby Martin. But we don't know what happened to On. And of course, the rabbis don't like that. The sages don't like that. And so there's plenty of midrash on what did happen to him. The one explanation that I like, which we've seen before with other characters, is that his wife, he goes home after the challenge, and his wife says, this is not going to end well. And she distracts him, and he is absent. He misses the whole thing. It reminds me sort of my son, who, when a few of the kids in his Eidah at camp, some 20 years ago, got into a lot of mischief during the night, it wasn't my son, because he was sleeping. He likes to sleep. He missed the whole thing. They went out in the middle of the night, took a canoe on the lake, not a good idea. One of the kids from Beth Meyer, who's now studying to be a rabbi, Sass Oral, who was perfect. This child was perfection, and he was in the group of kids that took the canoe up, but not my son. He slept through the whole thing. I guess On did as well. The next thing that jumped out at me, and this was sort of a big one, in verse 13, Hama'at ki ha'elitanu me'eretz zavat chalav udavash. Now, we know that phrase. You look at the English, is it not enough that you brought us from a land of milk and honey? Sorry, Eretz Zavat Chalav Udavash. We all know the song. That's Israel. You say Tzion, it's Israel. You say the Holy Land, it's Israel. You say the Promised Land, it's Israel. Eretz Zavat Chalav Udavash is Israel. But maybe not always. So the first time we see this phrase is in Exodus. It's clearly about Israel. It appears 4 times in Shemot, once in Vayikra, just twice in Numbers, this in verse 13, and then again in the next verse where it says, and even if you did bring us to a land of milk and honey, we're not going to be fooled by you. And then it's 5 times in Devarim. The first one of those is right before the Shema. So is this a phrase that is synonymous with Israel? Or is it a phrase that simply means a lush and wonderful land? Well, one would need, I think, to research the phrase and look at similar phrases to see if it appears elsewhere in other ancient Near East literature, and that's beyond my abilities. I didn't go there. But just to remind ourselves a little bit of how we take phrases at our meaning in our time, and it doesn't always mean that for all times. My daughter shared with me I think it was a tweet or a meme or something that it just tickled me. I apologize for the language. it said in 1,000 years, people won't understand the difference between a butt dial and a booty call. And that is why the Bible cannot be a reliable resource. So, phrases have meaning in their times. Those meanings change perhaps over time. And so Eretz Avat Chalav U'Davash I will still hold on to as synonymous with Israel, but apparently it may not have always been. And then one last thing that really jumped out at me is that towards the middle of the Parsha, God sets up this little activity to prove that God's in charge. And now I know this jumped out at me because I taught for many years in the Melton Adult Mini School that existed in Raleigh. At least one of my students is here today. I don't know if any others are, and I'm sure, maybe two, and I'm sure they remember this text. But it says in chapter 17 that the chief of every tribe is going to bring a staff, a rod, their walking stick, right, a big post. And they're going to put their name on it, right? Picture summer camp, wood burning kit, or little penknife. And they inscribe their name on it. And Aaron is the rod for the tribe of Levi. And they put all these sticks into the tent of meeting. And God says, and the man that I choose, right, the one that is the rightful successor, leader, whatnot, that stick will sprout. And these are sticks, right? They've been sticks for a while. They're not living. So the next day, as we know the story, 11 of the sticks are still just sticks. And lo and behold, Aaron's stick has blossomed and borne fruit. Now, as it happened, this is what I learned from the Mountain Course, in the 12th century, in Germany at least, there were these pageant plays. Now, I think we have today remnants of that. I don't really go to churches often, but like on Little House on the Prairie, they always put on a Christmas pageant, right? Like they have these things, these plays. And in Germany in the 12th century, they were a way, I think of it like Shakespeare almost, a way to teach the common person who didn't read the stories, right? And they did it with much pageantry and much drama. And the Jew was always present in these stories, not the way we would like the Jew to be present, but the Jew was always there. And so in the Christmas play in the 12th century called the Benedict Björn Christmas play, this text is used for proof for none other than Jesus, right? The stage manager says, let Aaron the prophet come forth carrying a branch, which when placed on the altar among other lifeless branches, it alone has flowered. Let the choir accompany this person and say, hail, celebrated branch. And then Aaron will say, behold, in a new manner, our almond branch puts forth green leaves. The fruit is Christ, but the branch is the Blessed Virgin. I mean, that's an obvious connection, right? It just is. And it brings to mind for me, another reference in my life, in the words of Harry Nilsson from the film The Point, you see what you want to see and you hear what you want to hear. And that's, again, one of the ways that we have to always have in the back of our minds as we look to Torah for proof of things, for validating our thoughts, for giving us guidance. We have to remember that there are multiple ways of looking at these texts, and we come to the text with our own baggage, and we take from it what we choose oftentimes. Now, I'm very aware of that fact, and that's why I like to, when I put together a Dvar Torah, I like to consult other sources. I do have a list of all of the rabbis and one non-rabbi that I consulted. There are plenty of places you can look online for Divrei Torah to give you these ideas and to see these multiple views. So let's go on to one lesson that we can learn from this parsha. What's the big deal with Korach's rebellion? Our rebellion's always bad. Seems to me 2 days ago we celebrated a rebellion, did we not? Right? Was that a bad rebellion? Well, we don't think so, right? I also found Divrei Torah that linked this story of Korach to the passage of the 19th Amendment, giving women the right to vote. Rebellions aren't always bad. But to go back to Korach, he says, you have gone too far, Korach talking to Moses, for all the community are holy, all of them, and God is in their midst. Why do you then raise yourself above the Lord's congregation? All the community are holy. Moses, why are you special? Where did they get that notion? Well, just last week, and I'm sure you were all paying attention, we read, and the end line, or one of the end lines of the third paragraph of the Shema in the book of Numbers 15:40, L'man tizkru v'asitem et kol mitzvotai v'yitem kadoshim le'Elohechem. You shall be reminded to observe the commandments and be holy to God. You are all holy. It says it right there in the Torah. What's wrong with what Korach said? And even before this, just at the advent of the revelation at Mount Sinai, it's made even more clear. If you listen to my voice, ushmartem et briti, and you keep the covenant, v'yitem li segula mikol amim, you're going to be a treasured possession among all my peoples. V'atem tiyu li, and you will be for me, mamlechet kohanim v'goy kadosh, a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. All of you are going to be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. Well, seen in this light, what Korach proclaims doesn't seem so off base. It reminded me a little bit of the 4 children of Passover. Now, mind you, I am one of 4 children. I happen to be the second child of 4 children, and so this is particularly always resounded with me. But the wise son, child number 1, says, what do these testimonies, statutes, law, what do these mean to you? And the Rasha, we say often the wicked or rebellious child, what is this service to you? I'm sorry, they're both basically saying, what does this stuff mean to you? What's the difference between my older sister and me, right? Like, what's the big deal here? But they're clearly labeled Rasha and Hacham. They're clearly labeled the wicked, or wicked actually, not rebellious, son, and Hacham, the wise one. And so the rabbis and the sages have, for generations, if not millennia, come up with ways to differentiate between the two. So too with Korach. Clearly, he's in the wrong. It's obvious. He's punished in such a dramatic fashion. And he's referred to even later in the Tanakh as an example of someone in the wrong. So what's the wrong? So here's just one take. There are many. He challenges Moses, also he's from the same tribe. Not only is why, Moses, are you in charge, but why'd you appoint your brother? There's like nepotism here, right? Like we don't love this. And Korach says, why do you raise yourself above? Is this actually what Moses did? Did Moses appoint himself leader? Did Moses appoint Aaron? We have one yes, we have a lot of no's. Who wants to answer? What? God appoints them. Okay, he acquiesces. So, right? Oh yeah, there's God. Right? God appointed. I can't even think of a time after Moses goes chasing after that goat before the burning bush. I can't think of a time when Moses actually makes a decision for the people that's not directed by God. I invite you. I mean, I'm not a Bible scholar, so I invite you to come up to your Kiddush and tell me of others. But truly, anything Moses does, I'm sorry, I did think of one, and that he's punished for it. Right, hitting the rock, exactly, right? Right, he's told to speak to the rock, he chooses to hit the rock, and he's punished for it. So in fact, it's not Moses that Korach is actually questioning or rebelling against. It's God. In Midrash Rabbah, Moses makes it very clear. Moses said back to them, if my brother Aaron had seized the priesthood for himself, your complaints against him would have been well put. But since it's given to him by the Holy One, blessed be God, to whom greatness, might, and majesty, to belong all greatness, might, and majesty, is not anyone who rises up against Aharon actually rising up against the Holy One. So this is not a democratic system. This is not a despotic system. This is a theocracy. God's in charge. Does this mean that only God can appoint leaders? That leaders have to be appointed by God? No. But for the rest of us, leadership cannot be taken. It has to be earned. In a book called Leadership on the Line, the authors argue that it's easy for leaders to forget that authority gained is a product of social expectations. When a person is ready to do the work, when they provide something that improves the lives of others, leadership becomes possible. In contrast, they warn, to believe that authority comes from you yourself, that's an illusion. Don't let it get to your head. Korach wanted a title he neither earned through doing the work nor received due to divine mandate. And that's why the Torah, according to one opinion, and our rabbinic tradition looks so poorly upon his rebellion. What appears to be a legitimate critique against Moshe and Aaron is actually a heretical notion of leadership, where a person tries to seize power because they believe it is owed to them. So when is it appropriate to challenge a leader? Does the Torah allow for challenging a leader? After all, not only do we challenge leaders, we're called God wrestlers. right? We are almost mandated to challenge God. Well, in just a few short weeks in the Parsha of Pinchas, we'll read of another challenge to the authority of Moshe. The daughters of Tzlofachad come to Moshe with a complaint about the status quo. If you're familiar with the story, Moshe has said that God, he's passing on the word of God, that in terms of the land, when they get to the land will be apportioned by family clan, and the sons inherit the land of their father. Well, Zelophehad only had daughters. So what happens to Zelophehad's land? What happens to his land? Does it just go back to the tribe? Did the descendants of Zelophehad not merit something? So they come to Moses with a complaint, just as Korach did, and Dr. Rachel Rosenthal of Yeshivat Maharat makes a connection between these two stories. Both of the stories list the names of the parties involved, singling them out as distinct from among the nation. The daughters make a point of mentioning that their father was not of the congregation of Korach, but rather died of a different sin. Now, it doesn't exactly delineate what that sin was. On the simplest level, it's just that he was one of the slaves that left Egypt, and of course we know that they're all going to die out. But there are rabbinic sources that point to other wrongdoings Zelophehad may have done that results in his death. But regardless, the daughters don't want to be linked to Korach. And in both cases, Moshe turns to God to understand how to resolve the challenge. For Torah stories, these are pretty strong connections. And here are where the stories differ in addition to their outcomes. In the story of Korach, the verb that's used, vayikahalu, they assembled. We are a kahal, we are a congregation, right? So Korach assembled a mob, right? He incited the masses to approach Moshe and Aaron, implying the formation of a distinct renegade faction within the people. In contrast, the daughters of Zelophehad, the verb used is batikravna. They come close, karov, to draw close, to draw near, suggesting that their challenge is not one of civil strife, but rather the desire to come closer to the rest of the community. Right? So the one is looking to separate from the community, the other to draw close. Their approach, the daughters' approach, is intended to be productive, improving the cohesion of the community, not oppositional. So the difference in Korach and Zelophehad's daughters is less in their way of raising their concern and more in their actual goals, whether stated or unstated. Rambam holds that the problem with Korach and his followers is that they are not seeking truth, but instead are simply trying to open up conflict. The daughters of Zelophehad do have an agenda, but they are genuinely seeking a ruling from God. Their willingness to work within the system instead of in opposition to it is what allows their challenge to Moshe to endure and for the law to change in their favor. The Torah absolutely allows for challenging leaders when there is a genuine injustice being perpetrated, whether intentionally or not. However, those challenges are only worthwhile if they are brought for the sake of seeking truth instead of solely to pursue a particular predetermined agenda. The parsha concludes with an entire chapter detailing the duties of the Levites. A really boring chapter. We reclaim the notion of leadership as service, not a quest for power, glory, or wealth. And we read of the burdens of leadership and not only the rewards of leadership. Stylistically, chapter 18, this last chapter, is dull, especially after the drama of the Korach narrative, and that's part of the point. Demagogues create compelling drama. Leadership is found in the day-to-day shouldering of burdens, rarely thrilling, often boring. Shabbat shalom.